There you go.
So how much is enough? We were at a Metro meeting, I don't know, Glenn, 10 years ago, and I asked this question, and a lot of blank stares. So we struggled with that at our church for quite a long time. I ended up getting the spreadsheet that I'm going to show you today from a pastor who had been a banker, and it was pretty in a pretty elementary form at the time. So we asked earlier how many of you had a capital reserve account. How old is your church building? Obviously, that's a factor. Do any of you know how much you need prior to today? Did you know how much money you need in a capital account? We'll go through that in terms of a couple ways to look at that. Tim's already given us one. And so anyway, that's where we found a lot of us 10 years ago is nobody really knew how much we needed. So the first thing that we did was determine what's the threshold for a capital asset. So we have about a $3.5 million budget. So for us, we used 1,000. I was chatting with Glenn. They use about 5,000. If you have a smaller church, it may be a smaller number. So you need to know where you're going to start, what you consider to be a capital asset. And then, and this is kind of the same thing that Glenn went through, is make a list of your capital assets. Again, you can start anywhere. One of the things we did early on was we went back and started looking at the capital replacements we had done for the last 5 years. And so that was a good starting place for us because we knew how much we had spent when we replaced it and that type of thing. And then again, I won't spend a lot of time here because Glenn covered that. You know, when was the asset put in service and what's the life expectancy and the current replacement value. And then one other note along that line, for us a big area is remodeling. And so our board, we have a couple gentlemen on our board that are in the building trade industry, and they would like for us to maintain our common areas every 5 to 7 years. That's pretty aggressive. That's what a lot of your restaurants and things like that are doing that on about that schedule. But that's an important question because that's going to drive the decision. So your carpet may have a life expectancy of 10 or 12 years, but if your board has said we want these common areas to be redone more frequently, that's a factor you need to take into account. So again, you start collecting your data. By the way, we have been working on our spreadsheet, and again, very similar to Glenn's, and so I won't spend a lot of time there. But we've been doing this for about 5 years, and so we are not done yet. We thought we were done, and about 2 weeks ago, I received a request to replace one of our soundboards. The music department had put in all of their data, we thought, and that particular board was not in the plan. So within our culture, that becomes an issue because if it's not in the plan, then we have to go for approval to the treasurer. So we're kind of in the process of that right now. But anyway, so we have a similar spreadsheet. Again, that is on your jump drive, and we will take a look at that. So once you've collected your data, then you're going to need a couple of other pieces of information. What's your current capital reserve balance? And then also, how much is your annual capital reserve budget? As a result of this process, we've increased our capital reserve budget item from about 0 to 100,000. This is what the summary tab, once you start getting all your data, looks like. This has been really helpful for us as we go to our board. So the last time we update this about every September, and so you'll see there that at that time, well, let me hit just a couple of items on here. Our fiscal year, it has that and all that. We figure that our capital plan's about 98% complete. This is the total of all of our capital assets that are in this plan currently. So about $3.7 million, as we said, everything's not in there. And then based on the calculations the spreadsheet does, it gives us the recommended capital budget. So you can see that we are already a little bit shy of where we need to be on an annual basis. But we realized that in order to not injure our ministry, that we were going to have to work our way into getting to that target. This is another thing I added recently in talking to Tim. So we have about 131,000 square feet. So our capital cost per square feet is $1.67. You'll remember Tim told us earlier someplace between $1 and $2 a square foot. So we're right in that target. In addition, as you travel down then, there's also a monthly reserve number there. And then the required reserves as of the date of this and so forth. So all of these numbers are coming from the spreadsheet. But the big one there is right now we had in our reserve account when we did this, we had 235,000. And what we would need, and this is over about a 20-year period. I'll show you another chart that'll help you with that. But we have a shortfall there of about $1.9 million. It's kind of a little bit like, and so again, this is really helpful for your board. Our spreadsheet then basically takes you out 20 years, and you can see how much you need per year. And somebody asked the question, we work this all the time. We were going to remodel our chapel. It was built in 1983, has not been remodeled. It's been painted and that type of thing, but we were going to do extensive remodeling, and because of the number of replacement items for 2013-14, we pushed that out a year. So we're constantly working the priorities in this. Let me jump to a graph down here that I think will also help. Basically what this graph then is showing you is your cumulative capital expenditures. Those are the red. And then your cumulative capital reserves. So what this helps you see, and that's based upon how much you're going to put in from your budget every year and how much you have to date. If the blue line is above the red towers, that's good news. That means that you have more than you need. And and you'll see we have a few years out there like 21, 22, where the red line starts to inch up above the blue line. What that means is we're not going to have enough money in the plan. So how do we deal with those gaps? Each year we take our reserves at the end of the fiscal year, our undesignated funds, and our board makes a decision on what to do with those funds. And so over the last few years, we've been pumping a lot of those monies into our capital account because we're so far behind the 8 ball. And so I think and again, I love Glenn's spreadsheet. His tool is, I think, is a great simple tool. The thing I love about this that this banker gave us is it gives you a long-term outlook so that you can look at what things are planned over a period of time. Let me just show you a couple other quick tabs. Then by year, our spreadsheet then will tell you what are the specific things. So this would be 2016, just as an example. We can go out any number of years and see what are the items that are required for that particular year. All this again is on the sheet that you have in front of you. So it's a great tool for planning for your facility manager and for your just for your budgeting purposes. You can look out 20 years. We use this with our board. We go over this probably at least once a year, and we're reviewing the priorities for that particular year. Usually before we go to them, we take a look at where we are financially, and then we do any balancing we need to in terms of the projects that we're going to be doing. As you can see, we have a lot of audio equipment in there. I do want to just go back for a second to the current year. And one of the things that happens with this spreadsheet, as Glenn mentioned, we don't replace an HVAC system just because the time came to replace it if it's still working. We let it work for as long as it'll work. It rolls those from year to year. So that's why the current year is always massive, is because you have a lot of items that haven't need to be replaced based on our life cycle, and so those will roll forward. Once an item is replaced, we update that in our spreadsheet, and it automatically calculates it out to the next 15, 20 years or whatever is required. So it's kind of an ongoing. We do have a period every year in September where we go through this in a lot of detail, but the spreadsheet kind of just, once you get it built, as long as you continue to put the capital replacements in there that you put in place that year, it kind of maintains itself. Computers are not on this spreadsheet. We do not consider them a capital asset. We consider them a disposable asset, and so those are in just our regular budget. So.
What's your threshold for putting stuff in here?
About our threshold for putting things in here is about $1,000. So that's what we consider capital. Every year I get requests for items less than $1,000 during the budgeting process, and I encourage our staff to put that in their budget. And so we don't include that in the capital. Yes?
What about multiple items of like kind that are under $1,000 individually, but you buy multiple items and take them over a certain number?
Yes, the question was multiple items of like kind. Typically, we're not putting those in here. An exception to that would be like all of the chairs for the chapel. Yes, in a case like that, we see that as a unit. I mean, the total of those, yes. Cheryl, we would look at the total of all of those, and then we would put that in this budget, yes. What we wouldn't do is, on an annual basis, if we're replacing a chair here or there, that would not go in here, but it's the total, when we do a total remodel and replace all of the chairs, that's what would go in here. We do have some interesting things, like with our parking lots are an example. We put both the total replacement of the parking lot or the resurfacing on there, but we also, because of the amount of it and the importance of it, we're also putting our maintenance of the parking lots, because the sealing and striping and all of those types of things are so expensive. We've put both of those into the spreadsheet. So yes, in the back.
Do you ever consider using capital fundraising projects as a percentage to also fund these accounts?
Yeah, the question was, in addition, well, we do fund this through our budget, and we budget, and then also at the end of the year through excess funds. The question was, have we ever considered funding this through a capital project? We have not at this point in time. So. And we have done over the years probably 6 or 7 capital campaigns. We have not done one for 10 years. So part of it is we haven't done a capital campaign since we've entered into the process that we're showing you here today. So, other questions? Again, this is a tool, and I would just, again, affirm what Glenn has said, that you don't want to go do this all at one time. Do a little bit at a time. Do it by building. You can do it by asset type. We had a lot of hailstorms, and so all but one of our roofs had been replaced over about a 4-year period. Our insurance rates went up, but we had all of the data. So we did all of our roofs. We got those in there. We made sure when we needed to replace the one roof that wasn't damaged in a hailstorm. So again, you can do it a little bit at a time, because it is a daunting task. So another question.
You mentioned that you just started this about 5 years ago.
Yes.
What kind of information did you present to the board and to the decision-making bodies that this was so important to keep up?
Right.
Our church is always mission versus personnel versus...
Right. Yeah. The question is, what did we present to the board? We basically presented the summary tab to them that I had shared with you a little bit earlier. And basically within that, we had a dialogue about balancing, personnel costs, ministry costs, and capital reserves. And so it was a dialogue, to be honest. Again, they kind of have walked with us through this, 5-year process. Also, it's been, initially when you do something like this, there are people who are uncomfortable because we've got a couple $100,000 that we're spending every year that aren't in budget. So we had to go back through. We looked at, we have what we call a table of authority, which is a fairly new document that says how much money can we spend. And that includes capital accounts are kind of in there as a one-off from the budget, because it's a little bit different account. But every year we would go back through and tell them what our plans are for the next year from the capital budget, and make sure that we have the funds to support that. And then once that's kind of I'll say approved, it's more of a reportable to the board. At that point, we don't have to get approval for each capital project that we set out to do. So, yes.
You mentioned that every once in a while items don't make it on that list.
Yes.
How did you address that?
Yeah, the question was what happens when an item doesn't make it on the list. In this most recent one, what we have to do is we have to go, our table of authority says the treasurer must approve any item that was not either in the plan or was not in the plan for that year. So he's the approval person for any of those exceptional expenses. And so those occur, the one exception to that are HVAC units. And again, when those go out, it's a timeliness issue. And so with those, we have pretty much approval to go ahead and replace those with just a reportable back to the board that we replaced an out of priority, I guess, item. So another question, yes.
Accounting-wise, is your capital, do you have a capital budget that's separate from your operating budget? So all these expenses run in and out of there, and so you've got your income from the source there, it doesn't run through the operating funds?
Great question. So does this run through the operating funds, or is there a separate fund? We have one bank account, but we have different funds within that. Basically what happens is we have within the budget, the funds from each month go from the budget into the capital savings account, if you will. All the expenditures come out of the capital savings account. And again, I use that. Those are just sub-accounts within the one. We actually have more than one bank account, but primary banking account, right. So yeah, it's kind of a fund accounting thing, So again, I don't know if I went through this, but review your cumulative replacement costs against your cumulative reserves, and that was the graph that I showed you that will show you any gaps. And again, review your documents with your church leadership. Determine if any additional funds need to be moved. There was an example of the graph. You can see in that we had our cumulative reserves that were budgeted, which is kind of the lighter orange color. We were beneath the need, and that's where we started adjusting by projecting some additional funds to go into the fund. And so that's how we got things a little bit better lined up. But we just gave you a couple examples here. We also, in this spreadsheet, you have the option of both a short life expectancy, moderate, and a long life expectancy. So like in the case of an HVAC unit, you can put in maybe like a 15, 16, or 17 years, or a 13, 15, 17. And we did that initially, and then that seemed a little cumbersome, so we pretty much just use our moderate or middle of the road life expectancy. But it does have that as an option, and that's what you're seeing here. So if everything, you could look at it, if everything was a short life expectancy, where you would be if it was moderate, and if everything lasted longer than you had planned. So like the children of Israel. So anyway, again, that was our overachieving. So yes.
Gentlemen, I'm just curious. This is fantastic. I'm loving this. But we're talking about the normal expected. How do you account for the unexpected expected, such as we're in Napa, California. So what about the earthquake? Or what about the tornadoes? What about the hail damage? How do you plan for that?
Buy really good insurance.
I was going to say, with our hail damage, ours was covered by insurance. And so, obviously there are things that might not be covered by insurance. And I think if something like that happened, we'd be chatting with our church family about, yeah, right.
Said that your premiums increased. So
They did.
you factor that in then on the operating budget?
So on the operating budget side, that is correct. Yes. Another question.
Back on the insurance piece, that's why it's really important to actually maintain your buildings, because
Yes.
Right now I'm in a situation where my board's like, oh, go back and sue the insurance company. It's like, how? You didn't ever replace your roof in 36 years on a flat roof.
Right.
And I finally had to get the insurance company to issue them a letter of denial saying, your roof was last had a new membrane 7 years ago. You've never ripped it off. It's leaked every year since you built it 36 years ago. Yeah, no, we're not covering mold remediation.
Right.
If the roof blew off and then you had mold, that would be a different story.
Right.
Yeah, most insurance companies now, and I only say this because of my incident with Allstate recently, is that most of them are now putting a clause in there that they will not cover mold, rot, and damage caused by leaks and water infiltration that may have been occurred for weeks, months, or years, which is why my ice maker line under the kitchen that's been leaking for years apparently, and my subfloor's rotted, they will not cover because it's obviously been leaking long enough to rot the total wood out and it wasn't just an unexpected type thing. Other questions? Yes.
I know there's so many circumstances that go into this, but I deal with boards that just like, tell me what percentage of our building we need to have set aside in reserves. How can I just give them a blank?
100%. Just tell them 100%.
No, seriously. What can I just use for a ballpark?
Well, again, I'd go back honestly to Tim's number, $1 to $2 a square foot. Annually. So for us, again, 130,000 square feet, you know, we're going to be between 130,000 and 260,000 per year. So when we did all of this work, which was before I knew Tim, you know, we came up to around 120 is where we're at today. So I think that's a great ballpark. So, you know, start high and knowing that you have some room to move is what I would recommend.
I just want to make sure we're not talking about two different things. When you have that $1 to $2 square foot number, are we specifically dealing with just the capital assets that we're replacing, or are we dealing with the routine maintenance of the facility as well?
Yeah, strictly the capital asset replacement. Your general maintenance fund should take care of the things that are ongoing, like your filters, you know, your caulking, and all the other stuff that you should be doing anyway. For example, most HVAC companies will tell you it's 15-year life on a you know, fairly sizable unit. Now, if you're buying cheap residential stuff, then it's probably closer to 8 to 10 years on the life expectancy. But to get 15 years out of that, they expect you to change the filters quarterly. Okay, so if you don't have that in your general operating budget, then you're in trouble. At the same time, if you can also every year clean your evaporator coils and do your other coil cleaning, you can add about 10 to 15% life expectancy to it. Now, I wouldn't budget that in my projections here, but it is something to keep in mind as to how you're budgeting your overall operating budget in conjunction with your capital budget.
I'm going to jump in here with one other one, and that's actually the vendor, and we'll pick on HVAC. If you will go to your vendors, they'll actually come in and help you do these assessments. You know, one that we've used for maintenance, they'll come in and at no cost, they went through our building and said, here's the age, here's what it is, here's kind of what condition it is, here's what needs to be done. They provided photographs, they provided, you know, some detailed descriptions that are great to be able to take to your board to say, we need X number of dollars to get us back to a level playing field so that we can get another 5 years or 10 years or whatever out of it. So, you know, you can use some of the vendors that you use today, and if you want to bring in a third party, you probably can. But you know, you can use them. You can use them as a resource to help you figure out where you are in that life cycle of this unit should last me 15 years. But by the way, I didn't replace the filters for the first 8 years. So I'm probably only going to get 10 years out of it. And so rather than you saying to your board, I'm only going to get 10 years out of this unit, we should have 15, you can go to them and say, we're only going to get 10 years, and here's why, and here's the evidence. So again, you can use them to help bolster your argument, for lack of a better term, or your point of here's what we need to do to get back to a level playing field, or here's what we need to do to try and extend the life a little farther if we'll do some of these things. So again, if you reach out to your vendors, they can help you with this process. Again, you don't need to, you know, going back to what Simeon was saying, you know, we can't all do it alone. You can't do this alone. Bring in some outside people to help with this, and they can support your argument as you go through this process.
Let me just share, I have a friend that is at a local synagogue, and they do not have a lot of, their particular preference is not to do a lot of capital maintenance. So what they do is they wait for 20, 25 years till the building is deteriorating and falling apart and the carpet's threadbare, and then they do a capital campaign. So that is another approach. And so a lot of it is going to depend. I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying that's another approach. And again, it depends on your culture. So,
You had a question?
Well, I was going to say, back to your point about getting people from the outside, and you might have expertise in your congregation. We had expertise in the congregation that I now work for in duplex or fourplex building, which is not the same as building the community center. And as a result, a plan was stamped with the wrong occupancy code by the architect, and the county approved it, and the city approved it, and they wired the entire facility with Romex. That's 10,000
Oh, nice.
square feet. So now all of a sudden, there's one circuit for a 4,000 square foot room with your blowing circuits, and to fix it, you have to rip open the walls and run conduit.
Yeah.
So I mean, we spent 40 grand because they wanted to save 35%, but they built it to residential standards when it should have been commercial. Wow.
Yeah, just, again, we call it the house of God, but it ain't no house. Our church buildings are complex commercial structures. They can't be treated the way we treat our houses. And Lord knows, at least some of the houses I've been in, you wouldn't want to treat it the way you treat your house. So, these are very complex issues that we've got to deal with. It's not a 1-ton air conditioning unit that I replaced for my upstairs bedrooms. I mean, we're talking with, 50-ton chillers and 100-ton boilers. I mean, we're talking with big, sophisticated stuff that is complicated.
And your boards and your congregational members aren't used to the increased cost, and so that's something they have to get over.
Right. Exactly.
when you're hiring your facility manager, let me recommend you to visit their home. If they don't maintain their home, if the lawnmower died and it's still sitting in the front yard and they're mowing around it with their new mower, or their house is falling apart, that may not be who you want to hire as your facility manager.